What up, cucks? It's your boy, the hater, up in this mug. and thankfully, some of you caught the error that I made earlier. I put the wrong audio and the wrong video up in this bitch. And you guys pointed it out, so I was able to release the real video. So thank you for that. Now, some of you were saying the hater needs a break. Well, I got news for you, pal. The hater never gets tired. I can still dance all night long. You understand what I'm saying? Now let's get to the topic at hand here, okay? The Smackdown results. If only the hater could reveal himself and tell you all the great stories that have happened this week. I think that would make for an entertaining channel as well. Maybe I'll do a podcast or something. We'll see. First off, let's get started with this show, and then we'll explore that. Now, this show was actually not bad, okay? There was, of course, a lot of bad, but some good. So it wasn't all bad, I should say, right? First up, Cody Rhodes comes out and interrupts the new Bloodline. I'm just going to call them the new Bloodline to differentiate them from the Bloodline, right? Cody Rhodes comes out with Orton and Kevin Owens, who have a lazy-ass t-shirt. It says RKO, but the letters KO are like written differently, you know, to signify that they're like a team now, because their initials match, whatever. It's really stupid. Like this, like, you know, the last 7 years of Randy Orton have been just phoning it in, you know? He just comes back, gets into a tag team with somebody. It's just like Jericho, like when Jericho had like a different tag team every year. Remember Y2AJ? Like, it's just lazy shit, but whatever. They come out, they beat up the Bloodline a little bit. Cody Rhodes gets the mic. Apparently they're in Madison Square Garden. Cody Rhodes says, I should be wrestling, defending my title here, which makes me think, well, why aren't you, right? Because he has to go beat up the Bloodline instead, which is odd because he came out wearing a suit, you know, so he probably wasn't even in the dark match. But anyways, the point is, Cody Rhodes understands that this is not working out. You know what I mean? This is just not working out. It's really that simple. Cody Rhodes is not working out as the WWE champion, okay? It's just not happening. So he has to, like, pretty much say, oh, I suck, you know, like, I should be wrestling for the title and doing my job, but, you know, I have to beat up 3 jobbers, right? So it's just like, he knows, he's aware that this title reign is a failure, right? That's why he's in a 6-man tag team match. Now, what else happened? I watched the whole show, but I did get bored at certain parts, so I don't remember. I don't remember what happened next, for example. I know that eventually there was a women's match. Tiffany Stratton predictably won the triple threat match to become Money in the Bank. This is a good choice, you know, for her to be in there because she's athletic and she can do like moonsaults and cool things like that. So, you know, you need her in the match, right? Jade Cargill, obviously they're not pushing her yet. This is going to be like her versus Bianca Belair. That's where this is going, I think. So, you know, we'll just wait for that to happen, right? Then we had like the match of the night. When I say the match of the night, I'm not saying it was a great match, but it was like the match that was actually a match. It was long and drawn out. LA Knight comes out. He's massively over as usual. It's him versus Logan Paul versus Santos Escobar. I actually thought Santos was going to win this match, and this was going to set up the LA Knight Logan Paul feud, right? But what's going to happen instead is LA Knight wins the match, and Logan Paul's going to screw him at Money in the Bank, and that's going to set up the feud. So nothing ventured, nothing gained, but we are where we left off, right? Like in Tyrese Halliburton comes out and he's like supporting Logan Paul, and even though Tyrese is a basketball player, he's not even that much taller than Logan Paul. You know what I mean? Like, it just shows like how big Logan Paul really is. He's big. He's the second biggest guy there. Then Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks appears. He's about the same size as LA Knight, which is an acceptable height. Like, he looks like small because, like, you know, we're used to seeing him in the NBA where he's like the tiniest guy. But in reality, he's a big dude, and LA Knight just looks believable as a result. And obviously, LA Knight is more muscular than both of these jobbers combined. So this was pretty cool. It was a nice little moment. I'm not sure if this is going to be like the SummerSlam match. Maybe they'll have Tyrese and, you know, Jalen in the corners. I think that's a nice little touch. It is what it is. Then we had the Jobber triple threat women's match. Indy Hartwell and Blair Davenport lose to Naomi. So Blair Davenport gets drafted from NXT in like the supplemental draft or whatever, the last pick, and all of a sudden she does nothing and she's in a match to become the women's Money in the Bank, which means if she wins 2 matches, she's essentially world champion. It's silly, especially considering that she's not this like NXT person that has succeeded. There was a part, I didn't take any notes today, so I might be missing some things that happened, but I think I hit most of it. There was one part that I did want to make a note of, but I didn't get a chance to. Apparently, like, next week, there's a tag match. It's DIY versus, like, some other tag team, right? That's great and all of that, you know what I mean? Like, good for DIY, but there's a part where they talk about how, like, apparently the next match is in Toronto, and Tommaso Ciampa basically says, he's like, Toronto is a place with great significance for DIY. And he explains how they won their NXT titles there for the first time. And he's like, and 8 years later. 8 years, motherfucks? These guys have been in the company for 8 years? It feels like they started last week. That's what, like, really, like, caught my eye. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, this really is just unacceptable. Like, Tommaso Ciampa has to be, like, nearly 40 at this point, right? I mean, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? It is just crazy to me. It's crazy to me that we have Tommaso Ciampa in this company for 8 years, and yet he has done basically nothing for 8 years. And it's like the 8 years of his life. You know what I mean? It's the 8 years of this fucker's life. You know, he's been, like, look, I just Googled it. He went to WWE. He started in 2015, if you don't count the time when he was, like, Muhammad Hassan's lawyer that one time. But here, he is, this run, he's been there for 9 years, motherfuckers. 9 years. And all they've done, both of them, is be in NXT. Like, they're so bad that they're, like, almost 40, and at 40, they find themselves finally getting a chance on the main roster. This is absurd. This is ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, 8 years in developmental, and somehow they still have a job. 8 years of not drawing one dime, motherfucks. 8 years of getting paid, probably at this point, cumulatively, millions of dollars. 8 years, motherfucks. 8 years of that, and nothing to show for it. Now, what can I do? What can I say? I don't particularly give a rat's ass, but the facts are what the facts are. This is unacceptable. And then lastly, we have the one good segment of the night. I mean, some of the other things were good. Like, some of the matches were okay. I enjoyed the Logan Paul LA Knight thing. It really did feel like a big moment for LA Knight. Maybe because he's in fucking, what's it called? In New York. And New York is like a smarky crowd, but he was over anyways. And then the final segment happened, which was like, whatever. They had a name for it, but it was basically the Bloodline, you know, crowning ceremony or whatever. It's the time when they're gonna crown Solo Sikoa as the new tribal chief, right? I thought this was actually really, really well done. The question still needs an answer, right? Because it's like, you have Solo Sikoa and he's a douche, but you have him there, right? You have Solo Sikoa. So the question about Solo Sikoa essentially is, well, if he's gonna just start a new group effectively, right? Like, he's gonna kick out Jimmy Uso, why does he have to be part of the Bloodline? Why can't he just start, you know, Solo Sikoa and friends? You know, because there's nothing about this that has to do with the Bloodline. This is a direct provocation to Roman Reigns, who fundamentally has done nothing to Solo Sikoa, right? He was the tribal chief for like a long time, and Solo Sikoa's argument basically in kayfabe is, oh, you lost one match, so now I'm like the head of the table. But I get it. Maybe he wants to make a point, right? So that's why I give this a pass, and I actually enjoyed it. And it got me thinking a little bit. I started thinking, I was like, wow, if Solo Sikoa wasn't doing this, right, what would he be doing during this 2 months? Like, whether you like or you hate Solo Sikoa, or you think he's a jobber like I do, the facts are the facts. And the facts are that since WrestleMania, Solo Sikoa is one of the few people that has stepped up, right? He's out there, he's wrestling, he's doing the best he can. I'm not saying he's not wrestling consistently, but like nobody wrestles consistently anymore, right? Like, Gunther hasn't wrestled since King of the Ring, you know what I mean? But Solo Sikoa is one of the guys that is getting that, you know, coveted post-WrestleMania push. Now, I don't care, because fundamentally, this is all going to end with him on his back after Roman Reigns pins his ass, right? But it doesn't matter. The points are still what the points are. So we can't really do anything about that. And we find ourselves in a certain scenario where, you know, he kind of, like, is, I don't want to say carrying SmackDown, but, you know, he's helping carry SmackDown. So Hopefully he doesn't turn into a jobber. I do think he should be rewarded because he's not going to come out on top of that feud, right? And neither will any of these other guys. But the segment's pretty cool. Basically, he has everyone acknowledge him. We see everyone kind of say 2 sentences on the mic, and we hear all we ever need to hear from Tama Tonga. This guy should never be allowed to speak on TV ever again. Same thing with Camacho, right? These guys should never be able to speak. As soon as Camacho got the mic, I remember there was this one random-ass segment where him and Unico were hanging out, and Unico's like, Orale ese, where are we going? And he's like, I don't know, Holmes. Like, that's all he knew. He's like, Orale ese, vato loco. He just said like the 3 words that he had heard Eddie Guerrero say. He just said them in the same order, and he was like, he played off the Mexican like stereotype real quick, right? And then I realized why he's never spoken on TV since then. It's because he can't cut a promo to save his life. Surprisingly enough, Jacob Fatu, he didn't do a good job either, but he was animated, right? And I like that. It reminded me a bit of Rusev. He reminds me of Rusev a little bit. Remember when Rusev would just come out and he would just like jump for no reason? He would stomp on the ground and he was just this animated freak and it was over, right? It was like interesting. It was like, oh, this guy's just like a madman, right? So I actually like the presentation of Jacob Fatu. I'm not saying I'm turning on him yet, right? I still think I don't see anything special. He's just like, I will say he lost a lot of weight. Like from the clips that I've seen on MLW, he's much leaner and he's lost the weight on what used to be his fat ass. Because the Samoans, they got fat asses, right? And it's like, that just makes him look goofy. Like, for example, Rikishi could never be taken seriously as a main eventer because he's got a giant ass. So, like, he lost the weight, so he looks great, but his size just isn't there, unfortunately. You know what I'm saying? I hate to say it, but he just, like, I don't know why this guy's going to be pushed as a main eventer instead of a mid-carder. Like, he's like, smaller than, he's comparable to Sami Zayn. You know what I mean? He's just, like, a regular guy. You know, like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but, like, you know, he's not, like, chiseled out of stone, right? He's, like, on the level of Carlito. And if you remember when Carlito debuted, he was, like, a light heavyweight. He wasn't taken seriously. You know what I'm saying? Like, you put Carlito next to, like, Randy Orton or John Cena, and you're like, oh, okay, clearly John Cena is, like, the superior wrestler, right? But, so, I don't quite see exactly what's happening with Jacob Fatu, but I will say he acknowledged Sol Sikoa as well. All 3 of them did. And of the acknowledgments, Jacob's was the most interesting, because it was the most forceful, right? It's almost like, like the way that he said it, and I'm not trying to overanalyze it, but the way that he said it, basically, he was just saying, like, more or less, like, hey, crowd, wake the fuck up. Like, something's happening here. Because if it were up to Tama Tonga and Camacho, I'm not saying Camacho to be a dick, I just forget what his Samoan name is, right? So if we're up to Tama Tonga and Camacho to get the crowd excited, everyone will be falling asleep. Because, like, fucking Tama Tonga is like, Uraku, harabataku. He just says a few random-ass Tongan words that apparently, like, the Samoans also understand. And he's like, I acknowledge you, dog. And then Camacho talks and he's like, he says some other bullshit I don't even understand. He's like, yeah, I acknowledge you, it's all love. And then Solo's like, yeah, dog, it's all love, bruh. Right? And all of a sudden it's like, what is this, Malibu's most wanted? Samoa's most wanted? It was cringe. But Jacob Fatu, at least, he's the only one who like seems to understand that like talking this way is just goofy as fuck. So he does his own madman thing, right? And then they give it to Paul Heyman, who kills it. I know that I always say Paul Heyman's overrated, but he really killed it this time, right? Because you knew he wasn't going to acknowledge them. Like, that's the whole point of the segment. But the way he did it was just, it was very emotional. Like he really sold, like, simultaneously the fear, right? But also the defiance. So I thought this was a rare, great Paul Heyman moment. This does not excuse the fact that Paul Heyman has been hanging around with these guys for 2 months, and for some reason, nobody understands why. Why doesn't he just go away? Just turn right. When they're going left, turn right. You know what I'm saying? Turn right. Go find Braun Breaker and make him, like, your client. You know, find another client. Do that. You don't have to be, like, hitched to them. So basically he says, I don't acknowledge you. And then they beat the shit out of him. This actually makes sense. At first I'm like, well, why are they beating him? That doesn't make any sense. Like CM Punk didn't acknowledge them, right? He didn't acknowledge him and they didn't beat his ass, right? Well, I mean, primarily it's because they don't want to bury CM Punk, but kayfabe-wise, it makes sense, right? Paul Heyman is the wise man. He's part of the family, right? So this is like a legit betrayal. Like, it could be construed that Solo Sikoa has been trying for these last 2 months to kind of, like, get support, right? And that's what he's doing by bringing in all these jobbers. So Paul Heyman serves as, like, the last line of support in some ways, right? He's the last line of support because he's the dude that can actually, like, show up, basically, and be like, yo, like, I'm here, bruh. You know what I'm saying? I'm here. You gotta acknowledge, like, you know, Solo Sikoa. but he can't because he's the only person aside from Solo, right, that is part of like the original Bloodline. So he kind of, and also obviously he speaks for Roman Reigns. So if Paul Heyman acknowledges him, there's two explanations. Either Roman Reigns has acknowledged him, which is never going to happen, or Paul Heyman is betraying Roman Reigns, which also is not going to happen yet. Like, that would actually be an interesting way to tell the story, right? Like, basically what happens is Paul Heyman gets pissed off that they whooped his ass because Roman Reigns didn't save him or whatever, right? And then he just betrays Roman Reigns. And then, like, it turns out that Paul, like, that would be the best way to do it, right? Because a lot of people want, like, Roman Reigns to come back with the Usos, but I think the best, and to reform, essentially, like, the real Bloodline, but I personally think it should be, like, the Usos should do, like, a double swerve, and they should join Solo, right? They should just both turn heel, join Solo Sikoa, and then Roman Reigns should just blast through them one by one. And then maybe with The Rock as well, and they have their match. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Point is, that's how that goes. Obviously, during this entire segment, the fans were losing their minds with the "We Want Roman" chants, right? Obviously, just like I said, I predicted this, and I know what everyone's thinking. Oh, hater, everyone could have seen this coming. No, motherfucks. No, they couldn't have. Because the day after WrestleMania, I said, you can go back to my videos, I said, the Roman Reigns pop is going to be legendary. And you can look at the comments on that video. And the comments on the video were, what are you talking about? Cody's so over. And like, once again, I was validated and I was right. So with all that being said, I give this episode of SmackDown a solid 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 this episode gets, which meets the threshold of above 6. If it's above 6, that makes me want to watch the next SmackDown, which I'm going to watch. So that's how that works, cuz the reality is that Solo Sikoa, at a certain point, he's got to get some credit. You know what I mean? At a certain point, this guy's being trusted with the main event. And even though, like, he's not The Rock, he's not Stone Cold, he's doing his best. And I give props for that, you know? I give props for putting in the work, cucks. That being said, take care of yourselves, motherfuckers.